going to go ahead and start to record. All right, real good. Welcome, everybody. My name is Leo Colegio. I'm the School Family Community Engagement Coordinator at TEA. Thank you all for joining us. I wanted to thank you all. Yeah, thanks for being here. I have just a couple of quick housekeeping items to share. One of them is that the Q&A function will be open. That's not to say that every response will be there'll be an opportunity to respond here, but they will be reviewed and we'll move forward with that. Number two, the slide deck that you'll see today will be posted on our website, and that's actually still going through some accessibility checks. And once that's completed, we can work to place it on the website. So that'll be placed on the webinar website, and then my guess is just a couple of days. And so with that, today we're going to focus on STAAR redesign, and I want to welcome our guests, Jose Rios and Iris Tien. And with that, you can take it away.
Great. Thank you, Leo. So we wanted to take this opportunity to get to speak with you all a bit about the redesign of the STAAR. And so we, as Leo said, we will make sure you all have access to these slides. I think we particularly just wanted to make sure you all could hear directly from us why some of these changes are happening, how they're coming about, some of the rationale behind them. And then I don't know, I'll say I think we have a number of a lot of content to get through because there are some exciting changes happening. And if we don't get to questions today, we'll just make sure to get a list of them from Leo and just follow up with you all. And we'll also, so we're going to go through a couple of slides around what is happening, why, as well as what are the current resources that are out there for you all to just be aware of. And also we're always interested in what other resources we could be providing to better get the word out. I think a lot of the feedback we've heard so far talking to folks is, as soon as they understand what's actually coming, it's really helpful. And the question is, how do I do a better job of telling the rest of the educators on my campus, in my district, so everyone else has the same information I do. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and get started with this set of slides, which I will also say, if you've been in any of the presentations that the commissioner has been giving across the state, he's visited, I believe at this point, all the different regions to at least talk to some of the superintendents and whoever from their team was able to attend. So you might have heard some of this before, in which case, apologies, you're going to hear it again, but hopefully, I think a lot of what we've added so far has been what resources that we've put up in the past couple of weeks or so. And so there might still be a little bit of new stuff for you. So I am going to get my screen shared. Oops, let me see.
That looks good.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, so for those of you who I have not talked to or haven't met before, my name is Iris Tien. I am the Executive Director of Assessment at TEA. Let me actually, before I even move any farther, let me let Jose also just do a really quick intro of himself in case you haven't talked to him before as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Jose Rios. I work with Iris, and I am in charge of the administration of our state test and also the development of accommodation policy for our state test, as well as our assessment for special populations, TELPAS, TELPAS Alternate, and STAAR Alternate 2.
Thanks, Jose. So again, really appreciate y'all giving us the time to come talk to y'all about this today. Let me actually start off. I like to start these conversations with just a couple of quick photos from my experience teaching. I particularly found, this was a while ago, I had to dig through some photos. I found photos of my classroom and the graduating class from the year that TAX transitioned into STAAR. And that was, I think for me, I was a high school math teacher at the time, if you couldn't tell from some of the signs up in the photos. It was a super exciting change for me, because if you all remember what high school math looked like with TAKS, it was a grade level specific test, so 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and we were moving from that to a course specific test. So EOC now is, of course, Algebra 1. Previously, we had Algebra 2 and Geometry. And so I was really excited about this because it meant that our state assessment that my kids were going to take at the end of the year would actually be assessing what I was teaching throughout the year. So if I was teaching Algebra 1, my kids would get assessed on Algebra 1 TEKS at the end of the year. And so I think that was huge, a big deal for me as a teacher. This was, I think this was 11 years ago now, when that shift happened. And is one of the main reasons why I think I am so excited and also grateful to have the chance now to get to work with teachers from all over the state to implement these changes to the STAAR to make it even more aligned with what's happening in classrooms. So we know it continues to be an extraordinarily difficult time in education. We're trying to get kids caught back up. We're focusing on all of the operational staffing challenges. And what we really want to make sure we're doing is that all of our efforts are as aligned as possible. You know, we're all rowing in the same direction. And the goal of these changes to the STAAR, which started happening even pre-COVID, the goal of that was to make sure that STAAR is aligned to what's happening in classrooms. And I think even now, more important than ever is making sure that STAAR is also aligned to all of the immense efforts that schools are currently undertaking to set their kids up for success. So how can we improve this alignment? We've talked to a lot of educators about how STAAR impacts their instructional planning, their classroom practices, and we hear from a lot of them. They look at STAAR questions, they ask themselves, if I'm able to successfully execute all my lessons I have in my curriculum, are my kids going to be able to answer these questions at the end of the year? And if not, then there's probably some changes I need to make. And that's great. That is one of the purposes of what STAAR is supposed to do, to serve as a bar of rigor for standards alignment. But we also hear from a lot of teachers that they look at STAAR and they're sometimes tempted to change some of their classroom practices in not so great ways. And the best example of this is multiple choice. So we know the STAAR is almost completely multiple choice. And while multiple choice is a great way of knowing if a kid has mastered this particular thing, are they proficient? It's not a great way of getting them to proficiency. So if they don't already understand something, multiple choice questions is not the best way of getting them to understanding. And so all of the redesign of the test is focused on how we can design our tests in a way that is better aligned with what we want to see in classrooms, while continuing to do what the test is supposed to do, which is be this measurement of student mastery of our TEKS. So these changes are not about improving the accuracy of STAAR at all. So STAAR is a test that already has to go through an extremely rigorous process to make sure that it's valid, it's reliable, it's fair, it's an accurate appraisal of what kids know and can do. It is a 2-year process at least to build a STAAR test, which involves getting a ton of Texas teachers, current Texas teachers, to actually review and approve every single item before it gets put on a STAAR test. We have folks from higher ed review our EOC items to make sure it's aligned with post-secondary. We have field testing to make sure those items are not biased, they're accurate. And then, after all that is said and done, we still continue to conduct a number of different studies after the test is given as well to confirm that these are reliable, they're accurate, they're doing what they're supposed to do. So the goal of these changes that we're making to STAAR for this upcoming year, it's not about the accuracy. We know the test is accurate. It's about, is the test aligned to what's happening in classrooms? Is it sending signals to educators that are aligned to effective instruction? And so this was a huge topic of conversation at the legislative level. They got a lot of feedback from all of you and a lot of other folks, and passed this bill that required us to redesign the STAAR. And incidentally, that bill also required us to do a lot of other things. One was provide and continue to provide some of the optional resources we have, so interim assessments, our formative tool platform. It also had us launch a brand new pilot that goes one step even further from our STAAR redesign. we're investigating whether it's possible at all to replace our current one-time end-of-year summative test with a progress monitoring system that's in multiple assessments throughout the year. So that pilot is launching next year. Our applications actually just opened this week. But out of all those things that came out of the bill, the one we're focusing on today is this redesign of STAAR that is getting implemented in this next school year. So spring of 2023 is when everything we're talking about today is going to be implemented. And that is all about this alignment with the classroom experience, alignment with effective instruction. And we are working to make sure we're implementing these changes in a way that's as reflective as possible of feedback that we've gotten from educators with students. We've been talking to over the past year and a half. We've done focus groups. We've had educator committees who've met and talked through all of these changes and have talked to hundreds, I think 600 plus teachers at this point, 200 plus students. And so I've really tried to use those conversations to drive us towards making decisions that will get us to a test that is as aligned as possible. So it is worth it to just spend a quick minute talking about the purpose of STAAR. So STAAR is a summative test. It's really great at being a summative test. It's not great at being anything else. So what is a summative test supposed to do? It gives you an accurate measure of mastery of the breadth of TEKS. So you can use it to evaluate overall curriculum and instruction. What you can't use it for is to diagnose individual student knowledge gaps. So if you want to know if your kid has mastered 3rd grade math, have them take STAAR. If you want to know if they've mastered one specific standard, if you want to know if they've mastered the times tables, STAAR is not going to tell you that. And that's why we have so many different types of assessments out there that serve different purposes. The STAAR, as a summative, will tell you if your student is reading on grade level. It's not going to tell you why. Right? So a different type of assessment, like a diagnostic, might tell you that a student may be dyslexic. A formative assessment might tell you there are specific standards that a student is struggling with. And so the formative will tell you if the student has mastered the times table, the summative will not, right? And interim assessments, which are kind of our mini STAAR, a benchmark, which gives you this quick dipstick into progress. It's not something you want to do all the time. It gives you this view of where is your kid in terms of all of that grade, so all of 3rd grade math. You don't need to know if your kid has learned all of 3rd grade math a month after school started, right? So you see these few and far between, and you use interims to really cross-check and calibrate, is what you're seeing in your formative assessment results matching with your interims data, or is there some sort of misalignment? So I think it's really important for us to continue to talk about what STAAR can be used for and what it shouldn't be used for, to make sure that we are using the information and the assessments in a way that is going to better support our students. So even though STAAR is already doing what it's supposed to do as a summative, the goal of these redesign changes is to help us also support effective instruction throughout the year better. And we certainly don't want STAAR to accidentally be discouraging effective instruction. And so what does effective instruction look like? Based on a lot of conversations and feedback from educators, we've have 4 components of our STAAR redesign that are directly tied to what instruction looks like in the classroom. So if we think about effective instruction, it involves coherently building background knowledge. It's not just reading a bunch of random passages on random topics disconnected to everything else. It's not just having students read without writing. You can't improve reading just by reading. It's a combination of reading, writing, speaking, listening. It's not waiting to teach writing until 3rd or 4th grade. Effective instruction isn't just multiple choice. You can't just give students a bunch of answer choices and have them choose between them. We want students to be engaging in inquiry and reflection and creation, and not multiple choice over and over again. And finally, we also know we want to make sure that we're providing the supports and accommodations we need to meet all of our students where they're at, to give them access to grade level content. And so fundamentally, what we're trying to do with STAAR is to make sure that all of the practices that we just talked through, we are able to, sorry about that. We're able to reinforce or be reflective of these practices with the design of STAAR. So Can we reinforce the importance of building background knowledge by including cross-curricular passages in all of our RLA tests? Can we have students write more? So can we have writing in all of our RLA tests? And can we also specifically have students write in reflection to what they have read? Can we add more non-multiple choice questions? Can we look at not just having multiple choice, but other types of questions? And can we also try to make sure those questions look more like the type of questions students are already answering in the classroom throughout the year? And then can we continue to try to provide the most robust accommodations we possibly can, which we've had online accommodations for a while now, but because of the percentage of students who are testing online, not all students have access to that. So now by moving online, we can make sure that all of our students are able to access the accommodations that we're able to provide on the online platform. And in addition to that, we also, of course, have the moving to online enables a lot of the other stuff that we're doing, the new question types, the ability to get our answers back quicker. All of that is something, or the results back quicker to you all, as well as students and families, is something that we're looking forward to with the move to online. So I'm going to go a little bit into each specific pieces of what I just went through and just give a little bit more detail about what these mean and how this is going to be reflected in STAAR. So we start with the building students' background knowledge. So this is something where a lot of different research has been done about reading and how students learn how to read. Right? And I'm going to share one with you that is a study that the commissioner particularly likes to talk about. It's one of his favorites. Where they asked a bunch of students to read a passage about baseball. And then they had those students recreate what they read about on a replica. So I'm actually going to have you all, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to give you all maybe 15, 20 seconds to read this passage that those students were asked to read. It's hard because I can't see all of your faces, so I don't know when you're done reading. But I'm going to assume that you all got through part of this. And even if you didn't, I think you get the gist of it. So then the question that the researchers were asking, and I would have you all ask yourself as well, is after reading that passage, who do you think did the best out of those students at reconstructing the story? Was it A, kids who were the strongest readers, B, kids who had really good knowledge of baseball, or C, it didn't make a difference? Again, really hard virtually, but hopefully you all have in your minds what your answer would be. And I will share that when we go out and talk to folks about this, we probably get 90+% of respondents who just say automatically it's B, and they are right. Of course, the background knowledge matters a lot. It definitely makes a difference. Students who have strong knowledge of baseball were able to reconstruct the scene much, much better than students, even are the strongest readers who didn't have that same background. And so I actually am going to give you another passage to have you all read, and then we'll talk a little bit about implications of this. So again, if you didn't get through the whole thing, that's okay. Hopefully if you got through a couple sentences of this. So this is a passage about cricket. And the reason why we show this passage is because if you're somebody who's very familiar with cricket, you probably read this and understood exactly what was going on. If you're somebody like me that is not familiar with the sport of cricket, this is impossible for me. I have no clue what's going on in this passage, even though I consider myself a very, very strong reader. Reading comprehension of this is very difficult to me because I don't have the background knowledge. And so there's a ton of studies about this. This all comes back to how kids learn how to read, which is a combination of two things. One is the decoding, the being able to see the symbols on a page, associate them with sounds, connect that to a word. And then there's also this language comprehension of being able to understand what those words actually mean. And so both of these things are extremely important for students to become good literate readers. And so this is something that, again, with the studies, there's been a lot of studies that have said you need both. You can't just have one or the other. And in some situations, that background knowledge is actually even more important than the ability to decode. And so as educators, public educators, our job is to make sure that students have both of these, the decoding and the background knowledge, to be able to become highly literate. And so what does this mean in the classroom? So this is something we talk to a lot of districts and schools about, and how they're working to build that background knowledge. And so I'm going to give you just two examples of students, both in 4th grade. Student A is going to their ELA classroom. They are reading this really engaging, really fun story about a sailor that is also a giant. They go to their science classroom. They're learning a lesson about the sun as a source of energy. They go to social studies. They're learning about the Alamo. So they're learning about all these great things, great texts. And even if they are really high quality texts, it's a lot of topics that just don't connect to each other. And if we compare this with student B, so student B goes to their ELA class, they are reading and then writing about the characteristics of the Earth's layers. They go to their science class, they're learning about weathering and changes to the Earth's surface. They go to social studies and they're learning about how Native Americans are adapting to different changes in the Earth's surface. So student B, this is an example of an intentional, cohesive way of building background knowledge, because as they go to each of their different lessons and different content areas, there are these connections across the knowledge that are allowing them to form stronger knowledge or memories, be able to remember these things, and just as a whole become more literate because they are building that background knowledge. So let's then talk about what this means for STAAR, right? So with STAAR, if we look at our release STAAR questions, right, in our passages, they're high quality passages, but they've just been random, right? There's no sort of rhyme or reason to the topics that are covered. And so what we're trying to do here is reinforce the background knowledge building that's happening in schools and in districts by prioritizing cross-curricular passages in RLA. So passages, the way that they currently are built, this goes back to it takes a very long time and a lot of effort to build a STAAR test. Every single passage also goes through an intensive review from a group of Texas teachers who teach grade 5 RLA teachers, who come in, look at these passages, say, yes, this is high quality. Yes, this is accurate. We don't think this is going to bias against any particular student group. We think it's engaging. We think it's appropriate for the grade level, all of that. So all that is still going to happen. The new thing we are adding is that in addition to meeting all these requirements that teachers have to say, this is all true for this passage to become a part of STAAR, they also now have to be cross-curricular. So here's an example of a grade 5 RLA passage about a cactus. And this passage in particular calls out a couple of different things that have direct connections to what students are learning about in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade science. So particularly, how the cactus is storing rainwater, how other animals like the bighorn sheep rely on the cactus to get water. And so there's very clear connections here with what students are learning about in their science classes around how organisms survive in the environment and interact with each other, rely on each other to be able to survive. What this does not mean is that students are not going to be assessed on science in RLA. So all the questions that students are being asked are still aligned to RLA standards. Right? So they might be reading about something that's connected to science, but they're still getting assessed on RLA standards. And so again, the goal of this is to make sure that STAAR is signaling and reinforcing what we're hearing from districts, campuses around what it is that they are doing in their classrooms and in their schools to better support students throughout the year. Let me then move on to the second topic, which is around reading and writing. So also a lot of studies about this, but I think it's pretty well understood that writing is important, right? We should be having students write more often, earlier, in all grade levels, all content areas. This is something that I think has been a focus of a lot of schools and a lot of leaders for a while now. And another thing that's come up too is that not only do students need to be writing, but there should also be a connection between reading and writing. We know that reading and writing are reciprocal processes. They support each other. Having students write about what they read actually strengthens their reading comprehension. And so not only are we adding writing to all of our RLA tests, but we're specifically changing the way that our writing is assessed to be more like what we're hearing the classroom practices look like. So let me just give you 2 examples of 2 types of prompts. So here are 2 prompts, one which is a prompt based on a student's outside knowledge, so personal knowledge, personal experience. It's asking students, what's your favorite place you've been to? What was your favorite part? What did it look like? Versus a prompt that's based on text or something that they've read. So read these 2 articles about these 2 different locations, using evidence from the articles, write a summary, and tell us which one you'd recommend to visit. So the change, so this is what we're hearing from teachers, right? That really we do, both of these play a role in education, but what we hear is that we need to be focusing more on the prompt based on text for 2 reasons. One is that it's more aligned to what students are actually asked to do in their adult life, right? If you think about your job today, most of the time you're asked to read something, summarize it, write a memo, right? You're not going to be writing a memo based on where you visited during summer break. It's also because the second prompt, the prompt based on text, relies less on what is a student's outside of the school experience and more on what they're actually learning and their instruction within the school. So what we're doing then is based on those 2 different prompts, we're shifting away from what historically in writing, we've asked students to respond to a standalone prompt, right? So this is an example from 4th grade where we asked students to write about an invention that they think is useful. And we're moving away from this and now asking students to respond to something they've read. So they'll be reading a passage. This is an example of a play. And based on what they've read, they are going to use evidence from that passage to be able to answer this question. So explain how the character in this play behavior changes, how it's developed by the playwright. And so that's the second one, which I will say, I think when we talk to RLA teachers, both these changes, but this change in the way that we're assessing writing is something that I think a lot of folks are excited about because it is something that they are doing already in the classroom and so are excited for what students are asked to do in STAAR to look more like what they're asking students to do in the classroom. The third one here, multiple choice, I think this one is less difficult to explain because it's very obvious. When you walk into a classroom, kids are not just doing multiple choice questions over and over again, right? This is an example of a grade 4 math student work. They're not just answering a multiple choice question, they're actually drawing visual representations. This is an example of a fraction decomposition. But they're doing different things, right? They're doing this. Here's another example of a grade 4 RLA lesson in which students are reading something and responding to an open-ended question. So there's a lot of different ways that students are engaging with material in the classroom that is not multiple choice. So what we're doing with the STAAR redesign is seeing if what we have seen students doing in the classroom can also translate to a type of question on STAAR that looks more like that. So if students are being asked to do fraction models in math class? Can we have a STAAR question that asks students to fill out a fraction model? If students are being asked to answer open-ended responses, can we have more short constructed responses in our STAAR test, right? So this is another example of back to the cactus one, right? A short constructed response about why reading this paragraph in the cactus passage, use evidence from the text to answer this question about, why this particular animal uses the cactus to build its nest. Just like with the passages, our items are going to continue to need to meet a variety of different requirements. So items, just like the passages, need to get reviewed by a group of Texas teachers from across the state. They have to be able to say, yes, this is TEKS aligned, it's grade level appropriate, it's not biased. We think that our kids at the end of the year should be able to answer this question. And so that will continue to be the case. Plus, this is where I think we've actually had the most engagement with teachers and students about these new question types. We've put a ton of different new question types in front of teachers and in front of students. We've actually had students work through and interact with different question types and do think alouds for us so that we can hear the way that they're thinking about it, the way that they're approaching it, so we can make sure that the question types we're considering are truly asking students and assessing them on what they know and that they understand what is being asked of them. I think it very, very exciting to see the responses we've gotten from both teachers and students on these new question types. We've gotten some students who are saying, wow, this is way more exciting than multiple choice, which I think was surprising to me how much enthusiasm we got from some of those students. And a lot of teachers who also really believe that not only is this going to be more engaging, better allow students to demonstrate what they know, but also will have an impact on their instructional planning. So the last section here is around making sure that we have accommodations for students that mirror as much as possible accommodations that they're getting in their classroom. Right? So I mean, this group, you all know better than anyone, all of the work that is involved in making sure we're meeting all students where they are, giving them what they need to be able to access grade level content. And so there's a lot of different things that we provide our students to make sure that they have access to what we're teaching. And what we're doing with STAAR is try to make sure that all of those existing things that are given to students throughout the year can also be given as much as possible on STAAR. So I do want to show just a super quick, like 1-minute video of what some of these accommodations are available online. So I'm going to make sure I can share my sound, and then I'm going to play this. But just so you all know, this video is also available online, so you can watch it at a later date.
Pre-reads using text-to-speech introduces the text and makes sure to cover difficult vocabulary and proper nouns so students can hear them ahead of time.
High school student Charlotte Brown competed in the Texas State Track and Field Meet in 2013, where she won 8th place in the pole vault by jumping 10 feet 6 inches high.
Passages can be expanded and text enlarged for readers who need oversized text. The line reader tool helps readers keep track of their place within the passage. Pop-ups and rollovers use images, animations, definitions, or simplified language to contextualize ideas. An online dictionary and notepad mirror the accessibility tools a student uses in the classroom. Text-to-speech is also available for questions and answer choices for students who need this accommodation.
Use soaring to new heights to answer the following question. Which sentence best expresses the main idea of paragraph 2? Option A. Brown adapted her technique as her vision worsened.
The answer eliminator allows students to cross out answer choices. Reading parts of a passage through text-to-speech allows isolated or specific information from the passage that is referenced in the question to be read aloud.
In 2014, as a junior, Brown found herself in familiar circumstances. She had made
So this, of course, very short, not at all comprehensive, but this was actually, the reason we made this was because we got a lot of requests from folks just saying we want to be able to share a very quick overview of what exists on the online system with people who are not familiar. And we particularly wanted it to be a part of the presentations we're giving across the state too, so that we're able to elevate and make sure people are aware of all the different accommodations that are a part of the platform that are available to students. So of course, I think you all as a group are probably way more familiar with this than some of the other audiences that we talked to about the STAAR redesign. We have tools that are available to every single student no matter what. And we also have some that are student specific that can be turned on if it's a tool that students are used to using throughout the year. There are a lot of ways that students and others can see how these tools actually work in the platform. And so we of course have our online practice tests. And then we have our interim assessments, which are probably the very best way of allowing students to actually use the tools that they are going to also use on their STAAR test in a real, authentic way, because these are interim assessments that, if your district has already adopted these, or if you want to use this instead of a benchmark or something like that, it's the exact same platform that STAAR is in. So it's exactly what students will see when they take the STAAR, with all the same content language supports, with all the same tools in there. We also have our new formative assessment resource, which is not an assessment. Our interim assessments are an actual assessment. This one is more of a platform where the goal is to be able to allow districts, to allow schools to create their own, upload their own questions, their own quizzes. And so really the idea is that you're giving, a unit test anyways. Why not put it on the same platform as STAAR and then have your students take it on that platform, which gives them a chance to be able to interact with that platform without wasting instructional time, right? Because I do think we hear a lot of, we don't want people to just go on there and practice just for the sake of practicing. Can we utilize some assessments that our kids are going to need to take anyways to be able to become more familiar with the platform? The move to online overall, I will say there's a lot of work going on with the move to online, right? So of course we're really excited about the better access to accommodations, but there's a lot of other things we're also working on with getting scores faster, trying to improve our logistics and our operations of not needing to store as many materials. You all hopefully won't have as many just boxes and boxes of booklets and answer documents in certain classrooms or in certain closets anymore. And the move to online also makes sure that we're able to explore all the different new question types that we just talked about with the moving away from multiple choice. We did do a study, if you're interested. The study was about 1.5 years ago, where we surveyed and did case studies, every single district across the state, across Texas, to see where we were at. And back then, we were already very, very, very close to being ready to move online in terms of testing or in terms of infrastructure, right? So the infrastructure is different than student and teacher familiarity and comfort with the system, but we did have the infrastructure to be able to move online for the most part, which of course, I think with COVID, we've actually increase the number of devices. Like we've gotten the data we collected for this is still from pre-COVID. And I think what we've heard anecdotally from a lot of folks is that the infrastructure, the devices have improved even more since the last time we collected this data. There is a video online if you're just interested in learning more about the outcome of that study. What's also promising, and I think a good indication of folks getting prepared for this, is that last spring, we saw a huge increase in the number of students who are testing online. So we are at 12% in 2019. We are at 64% in 2021. This past December, we were actually at 88%. So 88% of all students who took the EOC in December took it online. So we see this big uptick in the number of students testing online already. But we still know that there are schools, there are districts out there that still have some ways to go. And so we have a lot of resources out there, which if your technology folks don't know that this exists and you know that there's still some work to do with moving online, please share with them. We have a implementation guide that is a synopsis of a lot of the different learnings that districts have told us, as they moved online. here's what worked, here's what didn't, here's what we should be aware of. So we have all that in this implementation guide. Tells you specifically like, how do you know if you're ready? Here's how to check. What do you do if you're not ready? Here's what you should, here's the next step. And in addition to this, we also do have a grant that is targeting the small number of districts that we know do still need some infrastructure upgrade. So this is a grant that was launched last month. There are a couple of different webinars that are either happening soon, or I believe there was a TAA that actually just is going to go out or has gone out maybe today. So look out for that. If you know that you're part of a district that needs still some infrastructure upgrading, this is the grant that you should definitely look into. Okay, so that's the end of, here's all the why behind the STAAR redesign, all the components of the STAAR redesign. Before I go into resources, I do want to just address one thing, which is a question that we get the most often when we go out and talk to folks about STAAR redesign. So we'll hear people say, great, like all these changes make a lot of sense to me. This is, it's aligned to what we're hoping to see, what we want to see in the classroom. But does this mean the test is going to be harder? And so we want to address that question really quick about how we know that when we make changes, those changes that we just talked about, we can maintain the same level of difficulty so that a student who is meeting grade level or approaching grade level still means the same thing year after year. So let me go through the process by which we make sure that this is true. So you all are likely familiar that every single year we have field test questions on our STAAR test. We also just did the standalone field test. So field test questions don't count at all towards the student. We're not assessing the student. We're using this to collect information about the question. So through field testing, we can actually figure out exactly how hard a question is, right? So if 25% of kids got it right, it's maybe a harder question. If like 85% of kids got it right, then it's an easier question. So we know exactly how hard that question is through field testing. And then we can use the information we have about that question. So we know it's a specific SE, we know what difficulty level it is. We can use that to build a STAAR test. And this is a very quick overview, but I will say there's still some other stuff that goes into this as well, right? If through the field testing, we actually figure out, for whatever reason, a particular student group did worse on this item than other ones, we can throw that item out, right? So we can use it to try to identify. We've already had teachers come in and look at it and say, based on my experience qualitatively, I think this item is not biased. But then we also have this quantitative check of making sure that when students actually take this test question, is it resulting in some sort of bias? And so we use this to actually throw out items that we don't think are good, are not quality. And so this is that extra check that we need before we build that test. When we build the test, we now know, because of field testing, exactly how hard each of those individual questions are, and therefore how hard the overall test is. So even though if you picture each of the items as a different weight ball, so each of those balls is a different weight, and each individual ball might be different weights from one year to the next, right? Question one on this test versus question one on another test might be different difficulty levels. But because we know exactly how hard each of them are, we are able to build a test that can be the same year after year. Right? So even though we might have 2 questions over here that are slightly harder than 2 questions over here, we balance it out by adding slightly easier questions in the rest of the test. So this is how we know, not just STAAR redesign, but really every single year, this is how we make sure that the test it's assessing at the same level of difficulty. And so whatever a student needs to meet grade level is the same one year to the next. And this is also why, incidentally, why we have different raw scores. This is why we have raw scores to scale scores. So one year a student might need 30 items correct to get meets. Another year they might need 32 items correct to get meets. And it's all because of this process of, we know exactly how hard the questions are. And so we just want to be very, very sure that we're keeping the expectations the same year after year. All right, let me go into then resources that are available. So we did put this TAA out back in January, which has links to all this, but it's also all on our STAAR redesign website. So we have a STAAR redesign website, and everything I'm about to go through is linked from the STAAR redesign webpage. So resources that we currently have available, we have new question type samplers. We have a 1-page overview of potential question types. We have a scoring reporting guide, we have FAQs, we have blueprints, and we also have a policy about which students qualify for a paper administration once we move online. So I'm going to go quickly through each of these just so you know what's actually a part of these. And then you all, if you haven't already, you can go peruse and take a look at these to see how they might be helpful for you all and for your schools. So the new question type sampler, this is available on the same platform as STAAR. So this is where our online practice tests are. There is one for every single grade level content area. And so what this is just a bunch of example new question types, so non-multiple choice question types for every content area, every single grade level. And there will be 2 examples of each potential question type. So you can go in and actually interact with what it will look like in the actual system. In addition to that, we have this one pager, which is if you just are wondering, what are these new question types? If they're not multiple choice, what are they? This is the best document for that. It gives you an actual list of all of them. So after we've talked to teachers about all these, we've narrowed down to here are the ones that we actually think are most aligned to what's happening in classrooms and also most appropriate for different content areas and different grade levels. So you'll see on this page also for each of the question types, here's the description. Here's which particular content areas and which grade levels this might apply to, because not all of them are appropriate for all content areas, all grade levels. So that is something that we really rely very heavily on all of our teacher focus groups and committees to get us to this. I will also note that when you see these, the reason why these are all preliminary and not finalized is because the standalone field test that we just did a week or 2 ago, we're still waiting on data from that. So just like I talked about with the field testing, we look at the data to make sure that the data is good, those items are good, it passes all of our requirements. We still need to do that from the standalone field test data before we finalize that these are indeed questions that might show up on STAAR in the future. The scoring and reporting guide. So this is where we've gotten a lot of questions from teachers around, this is a new question type, great, we're excited about it, but how are my students going to be scored? Is there partial credit? How would they get, if there is partial credit, what do they need to do to get that partial credit? And so this is the document that goes through some of the ways that these items might be scored. So there's one for every content area. It pulls out examples from the sampler. So it'll actually tell you, look at question 3 on the grade 8 sampler. And this is the exact same question that you see in the sampler. And then it'll tell you, if a student answers this, this is how many points they would get. If a student answers this, this is how many points they would get. It also gives you a screenshot of what a teacher might be able to see. So once this question, if this question were to show up on the STAAR in spring of 23, the teacher is going to be able to go into the portal and see exactly how a student answered, right? So with multiple choice, you didn't really need to see how a student answered. We can just say student selected B. With some of these new question types, you might actually want to see what did my student, drag and drop, right? If they got 1 point or 2 points, that only gives me a little bit of information. I want to see the entire how my student answered. And so that's part of this as well. FAQ document is something we're going to continue to add to over time. So this is just a compilation of some of our most frequently asked questions. And I will say that we are going to continue to add to this based on questions that you all give us. So if you aren't already aware, we have a help desk where this is really questions about anything related to assessment at TEA. But if you do have questions about STAAR redesign, feel free to submit some questions and we will make sure that we take the ones that are most commonly asked and continue to update this document. Our preliminary blueprints. So blueprints we've had for a while, y'all are likely familiar with what these are. The updates we've made to them are twofold. So one is that we have added some information based on feedback that we've gotten. So before it was just sort of the breakdown of the number of questions on each test. We've added some more information about how those questions, where they come from, what's the process. And we also added some more information. The second change we made is with the RLA test. We included what used to be a separate document. So we used to have a separate document that talked about passages. We're including that now in the blueprint, so it's all there in one place, and it gives you more information too about the reading load, the genres, the passage considerations, and a note about the cross-curricular passages that we talked about earlier. Last thing is the online testing policy, which I think this might have been something, I don't know if y'all have heard about this yet, because this was something I know that we intentionally try to reach out to a number of different folks, particularly special education educators, so that we can get some feedback on this. The goal of the policy is to provide some guidance to districts in how to think about which students qualify for a paper administration, particularly because we know that there's so many. There's just the accommodations that are available on the online platform in many cases are just more robust than what we can provide on paper. So we don't want to accidentally not give someone access to those online accommodations because they don't understand what kind of accommodations are available where. And so that's the process and the guidance here is based on trying to make sure that districts are aware of that and know that. More resources to come. There's a lot of stuff coming. So all this that we just talked through came out in January a couple of weeks ago. Now that standalone field testing is over, we're going to be using the data there to finalize all the new question types, the blueprints. So all the resources you just saw, we will have a finalized version for that, as well as a brand new, one of the things I think we've gotten questions about the most often, and we've heard will be the most helpful for teachers, is having a full-length practice test. So our goal is in fall to be able to give you this full-length practice test for every single content area grade level that will give you an idea of what the test might look like in spring of 23. So we're working on that. And in addition, we're also working on putting together some constructor response scoring guides. So for short constructor responses, as well as extended constructor responses, what are actual student responses, what are some samples of all the different rubric scores, and we particularly, I think, have heard a lot about the length of student responses and making sure that we have sample student responses that are long and short, that are high quality and low quality, so like high scoring and low scoring on rubrics, so that we can emphasize that it really isn't about length of a student response, where you can score very well with a short answer or very well with a long answer, or you can score not well with a short or long answer. So that's something that we've intentionally are also working on putting together once we get these results back from the standalone field test. My last slide is just another push. We say this to everywhere we go because we really, I think as you heard from the presentation, we rely so much on current Texas teachers to help us build a high quality assessment. We could not do it without you. We need you for all parts of the process, right? Reviewing passages, reviewing items, looking at constructor response, range finding, which is like what is the school, like what makes a 1 a 1 or a 2 a 2 on the rubric for our constructor response questions. All of these STAAR redesign focus groups, it's very important that we try to get as representative a group as possible. And we are always looking for particularly more folks who have experience working with different student groups. And so if you or folks that you work with are not currently already in our pool, the application link is here and you'll have this, but I'm also more than happy to put this in the chat. So there's a short application for you to fill out just so we have your information, we know your experience, and then you enter this pool that we can then pull from when we're putting together committees to make sure we have as representative of a committee as possible of all of Texas and all of our students in Texas. So this is an ask of you all individually. If you aren't a part of this pool, please apply, but also if you could help us spread the word to folks that you work closely with so that we can make sure that this is ideally we would love to be able to pull from folks from across the state. To everyone would be amazing to help us in making sure that we're creating a high quality assessment for kids. Okay, I think that's all I had. And I am going to stop sharing for a second.
Okay, thank you very much, Iris. Thank you, Jose. And thank you, Laura, for the ASL translation today. I will say that as I mentioned earlier, the slide deck will be posted to the website as quickly as possible, and we'll be working on that. Our next webinar will be Thursday, March 10th at 2 o'clock. And with that, we bid you a good evening. Thank you for attending.